good to go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Colby Bachelier, and I am the script coordinator and IATSE union member, who also started the IA Living Wage social media campaign. Like many of the best ideas, the IA Living Wage campaign was thought of in a moment of panic and frustration. I was crying to another fellow script coordinator about how I was genuinely worried of how I couldn't even afford to live anymore. She listened and shared her own stories. Although it was comforting to know that I wasn't alone, it was also really messed up. Emboldened by the apathy from many of the studios and the listening ear of a colleague, I called a day of action where we publicly shared our own stories of our struggles and why a living wage is so imperative. We saw the statistics, we shared the data, but as informative as they are, they don't resonate as much as personal stories. What started off as a simple hashtag turned into a battle cry to just make things right. Today, I am joined by representatives of the Local 871 to discuss. First off, hi everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Thanks.
Marissa, let's start with you. Let's go ahead and introduce.
I'm Marissa Shipley. I'm the Vice President at Local 871. I am also a working art department coordinator, and I have been the chair of our pay equity campaign for the last almost 3 years now.
Hi, my name's Katie. I am part of 871 as a production coordinator, and I started first as an assistant production coordinator. I've been in LA for about 5 or 6 years now and have been working in the industry most of that time.
Hey, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Thurlow, and I am an 871 member, sorry, and I am a script coordinator and writer's assistant.
And Emma.
I am Emma Danoff. I am a script supervisor, and that's all from Los Angeles.
Awesome. Okay, thank you guys so much again. Let's start off with the first question, which is, obviously with the film industry, we have like a bunch of different roles. As you explain what it is that you guys do on a day-to-day basis, what would you say is the biggest misconception people have about your role in an industry?
I think that for a lot of our crafts, and I think our department coordinators included, women's work has been invisible for a long time. And because it's not seen, because we do it really independently a lot of the time and behind the scenes, people don't, one, know it's happening, and two, value it unless they're directly interacting with it. So as an art department coordinator, I am ensuring that all the artwork on set has been cleared to be there. That includes researching artists and making sure we are within the legal bounds of rights and clearances. I am working with product placement. I am tracking our entire budget and cost reports, processing all the purchase orders and P card purchases for our department, and communicating within my entire department and within other departments. But that work is, if I'm doing my job correctly, no one on set ever really knows what's happening because it's all done before anyone steps on set. And so I think the biggest misconception is that just anyone can do this work. I think just anyone can be trained to do anything, but this is a job that requires knowledge and skill, just like all of the others on a film crew. Anyone can be trained to do it, but that doesn't mean what I do isn't of value and isn't worth the compensation for that.
Jumping off of that, I definitely think that there's a lot of similarities with that, with the script coordinator role and also writer's assistant. I think like a lot of times these are seen as entry-level jobs, but they're very far from entry-level jobs. And even the writer's PA job that's not an 871 covered position, but it is part of the writer's room support staff. You are required often to have at least one season of already being a writer's PA, or have already come through an agency, or have some other industry experience. So these really are not entry-level jobs, and most of the people in those jobs have been working for years. It took me, I think 5 years, I think, to become a writer's assistant and script coordinator. And also the script coordinator job is like, I think we need to just get rid of the idea of support staff and like the terminology. support staff and the terminology of assistant, because there's this mentality that goes with that it's secretarial work, and that it goes into all those other things of women's work. And these are actually highly skilled jobs. They're very far from being secretarial. And like in the case of script coordinators, like it is a very production heavy job. And it is a highly skilled job that's very production heavy. And I just keep repeating myself. So
Well, and I think even if our jobs have secretarial elements, I think the fact that that is valued or undervalued, not valued, just speaks to the society's dismissiveness of women's work. Like secretarial tasks are just as vital to everything happening
yes.
as somebody unloading a truck. Like some of those tasks are mindless for everyone and some require enormous skill. And so while our jobs are not strictly secretarial in nature, even if they were, that does not justify the terrible wages that they are paying us when they are paying everybody else on set or on the cruise much more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and to jump in about production coordinators, there's so many commonalities between what you guys have already said and what I have to say. And all of our jobs are very different from each other. So it's hard to ignore that, you know, there is a disparity here that's very clear, and it is gender-based. And it's because these roles have historically been held by women. So there's you know, traditional view of what this is, with little disregard to how all of these jobs have changed dramatically over the last several years as well. You know, I'll still have guys come into the office and they won't ever learn my name over 8 months of working on a season of television with them. They'll refer to me as the office girl. And so, you know, it's that vernacular is still there, and that, you know, viewpoint of us is still there, despite the fact that, like, yeah, you know what, there are secretarial pieces of my job that happen. We work in an office, that's the nature of it sometimes, but the logistical matters that we have to coordinate, the calls that we take at any hour of the day, there's a reliance upon these positions in a way that if we weren't there, it falls apart very quickly. And that is just to say that we do our jobs really, really well to keep things going. You know, you don't run a train without the wheels. You don't run, you know, at least in production office world, I would say that we're very much like the nervous system of a body. You know, we address problems when they come up, we see them, we put the fires out, and we work with other departments to get those things put out very quickly so that people are safe, so that people are paid, so that the show keeps going, so that the producers are happy, the cast is happy. You know, there's so many pieces and parts that go to this. It's honestly insulting at this point to think that these jobs are simply support roles. They're crucial. They're organs of the system. They're the nervous system. They're as necessary as any other role. And it's hard to try and justify to ourselves why we're not on the same equitable ground as the other positions of productions are. I mean, truly, like, I have to know so many different software at any given time and be a master of it and be able to teach it to other people, and then sometimes be able to fill in blanks for them. You know, like it's so many elements, and it's, yeah, that I can talk forever, but that's my 2 immediate cents on that.
You know, you were saying, what is a big misconception about what we do? I think the problem is that no one really knows what a lot of our jobs do. We are this invisible life force that happens that keeps the projects going. I mean, all of us have a very integral role, but I can't say none of, because I don't know for certain, but they're not taught in film schools. A script supervisor is a thrown away job. That is, I am sitting next to the director. I have a direct line an inch away from their ear. Pardon me, 6 feet and 1 inch these days. But, you know, we are so close and in the mix, all of us, and we are such an integral part, but none of this is, again, taught. Everyone is taught in their film schools or respective places of learning to respect the director, producer, the electric. Everyone knows what all of these positions do, yet we are like the dirty little secret, right? And if we didn't do our jobs right, the whole thing would fall apart, but no one can see that. We don't get awards. We don't get, no one, I mean, every time someone asks me what I do, I say, it's basically like, instead of script supervisor, it's script supervisor. Do you know what that is? And 99.9% of the time it's no. And they go, oh, so you write, you're a writer. I have the script for you. I'm like, no, but that's okay. I don't expect the people on the street to know what I do. I do expect the people in the movie industry to have a clue of how much we do, you know, and they don't need to know exactly, but they do need to just understand that we make it happen. You know, we're the blood, even like we're the nervous system, but we are also the blood because we are everywhere. Our 871 jobs are everywhere, but yeah, they're predominantly women, so they just don't care. My job was originally a secretarial position, and that's why it was paid so little, and it's just never crept up. I mean, it's a little better than some of the other rates, but it's still, we're important and no one cares.
I was definitely at a point for sure this year recently that I was going to quit the film industry altogether. Not because I wasn't good, not because I wanted to, but because I genuinely couldn't afford it anymore. So with that being said, what personal sacrifices, whether financial, personal, or even anything else, have you guys made in order to do your job in this industry?
It's amazing how much work we actually do on our time on the clock, but it's also for me, and it's my own fault, but it's amazing how much work I do off the clock. I'm rereading the script 20 times. I'm making sure I didn't miss that one thing from that episode, but that it's going to show up again in 3 episodes. You know, I spend all of my time and free time doing the job and no time doing laundry or visiting my family or helping out, you know, I can't say who it is, but someone that's fighting cancer in my family. I can't be there for them because I just have to be there for the job. I'm like that's my family, is the script.
I have an enormous amount of privilege, and I think it's important to recognize and acknowledge that. I got into this industry because my dad built sets for commercials and ran his own shop in town, and I worked for him straight out of college. That's how I ended up in the art department. I lived with my parents for 4 years after college. That's the reason I have a savings. And I have, you know, I'm a white woman in America. I have family and generational wealth to fall back on if I need it. So I think there are a lot of members who have been and are worse off than I am. You know, we have heard stories of 871 members working full-time union jobs who have been without housing, who are making long-term child decisions like family planning. I can't have kids yet. Do I need to freeze my eggs? Is that financially feasible for me? An enormous amount that is not necessarily personal to me, but I think is important to recognize. For me, what a living wage would offer me is the ability to take some time off. I work nonstop, and I realize I am in a better situation than many because I have full-time year-round work. I jump from job to job all year, but that means that I'm working production hours all year long and then doing all of this union organizing and advocacy work on top of that because I want to set everybody else up better so that they don't have to work that hard, because everybody else in the industry works wages that allow them to take time off between jobs, which is supposed to be some of the payoff for the hours that we work, hours which are not reasonable and unsafe, but there's supposed to be this other time off. I was saying to someone today, I have never once taken a day off when I have been on a job because my bosses and employers would rather me answer the phone from wherever I am with half of my attention than me replacing myself for a day, because the amount of learning that person would do, it's not like a set dresser who can step in and load and unload furniture. That's an important job. I'm not dismissing that, but that's a role you can swap people into and out of in many instances. Mine is not that job. I have worked sick from bed. I have worked from family obligations. I have worked from dentist appointments. I have worked from volunteering with the YMCA, traveling. Like, it speaks to our importance on the job, but a living wage would give me just a break. The pace at which I'm working is absolutely unsustainable.
Yeah, I 100% echo all of that. I think that as you're saying this, I'm crying a little bit on the inside because I literally just wrapped a production at 3 a.m. on Saturday, and it's Sunday after, and I'm already sitting here looking at what are my next options, where am I heading, how am I going to cover if there is a period between this show and the next. And sometimes those jobs come quickly, and that's great, but it also means that I don't get a break. I go from either wrap straight to prep, or I do double duty and start prep on something while I'm wrapping something else. There is no mental break. There is no vacation time. I had a family member pass this year, and the stress of leaving my team was enormous on me, to be across the country and to be trying to grieve the loss of someone in my life, but also feel displaced because I can't be in either place at the same time. I can't be with my family because there's still so much expectation of me at my job. And it's not that any one person is asking for that, but it's almost necessary in some ways, which is sad, but also, why can't we get paid enough to recognize that then? So yeah, that I completely echo that. As far as a living wage in LA, like, there's not many people I know that do my craft or Marissa's craft or anyone else here and are making enough money to not feel the pressure of what in between jobs means. So that mental break is a huge cost. Also, living in LA, rent here is ridiculous. Like, I don't know anyone who isn't paying who isn't paying less than a third of their salary on rent. And in a way that is very difficult. That strains you from being able to just live. Honestly, like, if a life thing happens, if your car breaks down, $1,000 at the car shop is one thing, and that already is a lot. But then you have to wait for the new car. You have to get another car. And when you need your car for work, you need your car to get to work. LA's not a forgiving city in terms of public transportation. For me to not drive for 2 weeks is a very big strain on me personally, financially, and professionally. So yeah, that money is a big deal. It's a big deal when it comes back to how we can even perform at our jobs in the first place, let alone be people and be human outside of that.
And then
the other thing I was going to add real quick, I'm so sorry. The privilege behind it as well, being able to start off in an entry level position that pays $15 an hour, which is the minimum wage here, is really difficult for people who don't have privilege at all. Like, if they're not coming from a life of wealth or family savings or anything, like, there's more even just than the financial aspect of it at play. Like, there is no entry level for some people. So the fact that the entry level already is as problematic as it is, and then to add on top that there is no entry level for some people as well is, yep, that's it.
Well, and then sacrifices. I don't know if any of us have children, but I'm a single person and I can barely make it work. I'm privileged because I'm a cool looking white person who tends to get, people like me. So I'm very fortunate to be able to be interview well and hireable. And I'm amazing. So, people have, no, I'm just kidding. But we are great at our jobs. That's why we keep working, right? That's how we keep getting these jobs. But
Yep.
when are we going to take time off to have a relationship? I'm single because I don't have the time to date and find someone to be a good partner with these crazy hours and crazy life. I don't want to go out and meet someone on a Saturday night. I just want to relax and rest and probably read the script again. I don't have children, but if I did, how do these people, like your family is, I cannot imagine coming home and having to feed my children or care for my child who was sick or had the flu or a cold, or how do you get them to preschool? There's like this whole world that, again, I don't know if any of this panel have children, but there's a whole nother level of people when they have husbands and spouses and partners and children and families. I mean, I have cats.
People that couldn't be on the call today.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. The last man I went on a date with, I looked down to do work. I looked up and it had been 2 weeks, and I ghosted him without meaning to. And I texted him and I was like, I literally got up, I worked, I went to bed, I'm working from home. I did nothing but work for 2 weeks. And I just had no concept of how much time had passed. I was so busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely am in that boat too. I would definitely say the biggest impact having worked in these jobs is that I have not had any time to date. And it's just, I think it becomes really hard because it's like, I guess in my mind, like when I set out to go into this industry, I always kind of thought that I would dedicate a certain amount of my 20s to just working, and that I would work really hard, and that working hard would pay off, and that I would be able to use this as a cornerstone to build a life and to have a family and kids and a house. And I think what we're finding is the world is changing, and I think the industry is very different than it used to be. But I think it's just still very hard on women. And when I look around at who are the other writers, assistants, and script coordinators, who are the other people making low wages, art department coordinators and production coordinators, it's all women, and it's all women that are giving up we're giving up our baby years, frankly, and it becomes really hard because you're like, well, it's forcing us into a position of having to choose. And I'm not there yet. I am not ready to give up on, my dreams for this industry. But it's unfortunate that the industry is so takes so much from us and pays us so little. And even if they just paid us a little bit more, it would be sustainable at least. And I think, and it's in any job, all of our jobs, we're all talking about is if we're gone for a day or we're gone for an hour or 2 hours, there's someone who urgently needs us. And I know, I've put out pages from weddings. I've pulled over to the side of the road. I put out pages this morning, there's no time off with these jobs. And I think there's a way to have balance, at least if you're making money that can afford you the things that, so if you're going to require me that I'm so necessary to production that I can never take a time off and I can never do my laundry, then you need to pay me enough that I can pay someone to do my laundry. Otherwise, there's just no, what life do we have left over after we work all our hours?
And when you keep members at these suppressed wages, everyone is so afraid for all of the breaks, all of the money for all of the year, that you can't stand up for yourself when faced with sexual harassment, when faced with bullying at work, when faced with being asked to do things outside of your duties or off hours. So keeping all of these crafts suppressed in these low wages is creating or contributing to many of these other problems, but which we've had conversations in this industry about needing to address.
Yeah.
And also interesting is there has been a recent push for diversity and inclusivity in Hollywood. And yet, although studios have been trying to put in these programs, they failed to provide the one thing that can support the people who can bring what they are asking for, and that is a living wage. I know you guys mentioned about how you're privileged, you were able to get financial support from your family. I'm just like, I am a very proud immigrant. I born in the Philippines, moved to Chicago when I was 4, and then 8 years old, good old Covington, Georgia. And it's also interesting because when I was working in production in Georgia, I was one of the very few people of color there. And in Georgia, I was even one of the only Asian people in the entire office. Here, I've noticed, like, even though I was hoping that there would be more people who would look like me, sadly, that wasn't the case. And the people who were there in the positions, they weren't there for very long because honestly, they weren't given what they just needed, and that was a living wage. It's almost kind of like we were being trained to be grateful that we even had our foot in the door. And it's like, if Hollywood is asking for all of these new faces, new stories, why is it that you're still keeping the people out?
I've heard from people who have participated in some of the diversity programs, mostly into writer's room, because I think that has been a push, but there have been some in the production office, that while you might know what stories you want to tell, you might be a great writer, learning how to tell stories and write stories is different than knowing how to work and build a career in this business. And so if we're not setting people up for long-term success with a living wage to sustain themselves and the training in how to really work in this industry, we're just setting people up for failure. And all you're doing is diversity for show, which is, 1, cruel, and 2, not going to lead to any short-term or long-term change, because these people are going to flame out because you have not given them the support and they can't afford to stay and figure it out for themselves.
Well, and also, why would $15 an hour encourage someone to come try for their dreams when they can go work in a, I don't know, anything else that is not their dream and get paid way, way, way better, be able to pay their rent and save for a family and all of the things and the goals. So they may actually look at this and go, no, that's an unattainable dream because it's just not financially possible. And that's not fair. It's not fair to instantly kill someone's dream just because it's monetarily insufficient and horrid. It's like
Exploitive.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And it's really sad because I 100% can give multiple examples of exactly what you guys are talking about, where Hollywood is saying, hey, you know, like, we believe in all of these things. We believe in climate justice. We believe in gender equality. We believe in quality education. And yet, in the same foul swoop, we'll create these programs for diversity that don't pay off, that don't lead to real jobs, that don't lead to a livable wage even, if you're even able to get in the first place, if you can afford the application fee, or you have the resume that they're already expecting you to have to apply to them in the first place. They're not, I'm constantly baffled by some of those programs because I don't think that they do anything close to what they say they want to do. And that's really unfortunate and really shows a huge disconnect between what we're saying we want and what we're doing. And I think it shows in multiple ways throughout the industry as well. Unfortunately, there's a lot of boys clubs still. It just is. And I don't know how else to say it other than that. There's a lot of grooming that happens between men and men, white men and white men mostly. And there's no breakthrough for women or people of color. And I've seen it several times, and there's just no way else to say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, I personally know, diverse people that would love to be in the roles that I've been in that have not been able to afford it. So I personally know that these wages are keeping people out. And I think that it really makes our industry suffer. I think that we are kind of setting people up to fail in a certain way of like, if you I work, all these positions get promoted eventually up, and like, a lot of assistants become showrunners, become, writers, producers. you know, and I know it's the same in each of our crafts. Like all of us grow into these bigger roles. And what happens is it's like, if you've been support staff, if you've been a writer's assistant or script coordinator, you have such a huge understanding of how a show runs, how TV runs, and just the politics that you have to kind of navigate in order to survive. And so it is like, you know, I think it's really detrimental to not allow huge groups of people to be in these roles because they don't pay enough. And it's, yeah, I mean, I just think, sorry, I'm just like stumbling all over my words, but like, to me, it's like, I just really don't, like, I look around and it's like, it's all white people. And it's like, why, like, how do I get to have all this experience? And like, I literally know people that are just as smart as me, that have a different skin color, that can't afford to do what I do. And it's, you know, it's not surprising that they are choosing to not be in these roles, because it's like, yeah, I still live with roommates and I have like a safety net. Like I have parents that live in California, and I have a brother that used to give me gift cards to Whole Foods. Like, you know, I have privilege. And so it's like, I'm not surprised that there's so many people, and I wish that the studios would at least acknowledge that these wages are keeping people out. And to me, it's like, it's the thing that we have so much evidence of. It's like, we know from a data perspective that this is a barrier of entry. And it is so like, I'm like trying to not swear, but like it makes me very angry to see the studios put up these like false, you know, smiles of, we care so much about diversity, but we don't want to pay for it. And it's like, that is just,
It's so performative.
yes, it's performative. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
It absolutely is. And
yes.
it's so frustrating I think there are a number of issues in Hollywood which need widespread cultural change in order to impact like seeing a change, right? And this is so simple, and it's just more money.
Yeah.
Right? Like it does not require training, culture change, new programs. It just requires paying us fairly to what the other members of the crew are already making. It is changing the number of salaries for, 5 to 7 people on each show. That's it. It's so simple.
Yeah.
And it's doable and it's achievable.
Very achievable. And I've heard the argument against it. Well, I had it tough when I was starting. They just have to pay their dues. They just have to work for less. And then, no one should have to work for less. Maybe we didn't know better back then, right? We didn't understand, or we didn't appreciate or something, but I don't care what you did. I don't care what you, a 60-year-old white man, did 40 years ago, because you know what? You already got in the room real quick and already made more than 60 years ago than we're making now. So no, that I repeatedly have heard that argument over the past month since this living wage came. I mean, not came, but the campaign really started and people started talking about it behind the scenes. And everyone's answer is, well, I did it. I had to work for less. And it's like, but you didn't. They don't really understand because they don't know.
I can also pay my dues and work up in the industry without being at wages, basically, which are minimum wage, right? You can pay me a living fair wage. I would argue even equitable wages, and I can still pay my dues, work up in the industry. I'm not asking to be in charge of an entire production without the work history or experience to do that. But as an art department coordinator, when my wage contractually is $16.82 an hour, and an assistant art director, the next lowest paid person in the department, is making about $44 an hour, I'm making 38% what the next lowest paid person in my department makes. The percentages are even worse for script coordinators, writers assistants, and production coordinators. It's very bad. Script supervisors might be making a better wage, but they are basically $10 an hour behind every other department head on set. And that's just to get even with the other department heads on set. Like, we are so far behind and have been for decades.
And I looked at a rate sheet for a production, and the script supervisor was paid less than the second craft service assistant and the third audio assistant. So someone that's job it is, not diminishing it, but their job is to go around and pick up trash cans. That was worth more money because it was a male position than someone who has the entire brain of the movie in my brain that could help people. You know, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's not even competing with your guys' rates.
I mean, I'm technically considered a department head. In my position, I run the entire office. If you put my rate in comparison to every other department head, I don't even make half of what the majority of those people make. Not even half of what they make. And there's no denying that historically this is a female position, and that it is still, like everything we've said, it's seen as administrative and supportive, and it's so much more than that.
Local 871 is 65% women overall in an industry that is still overwhelmingly male. Script supervisors are 93% women, which is like incredible and astounding. Our department coordinators are 81% women. Production and assistant production coordinators are 64% women, and script coordinators and writers assistants are between 47 and 55% women. We have an enormous number of women who are working in these crafts. We make up a good percentage of the women who are probably on every crew. And this is an issue which has been actively ignored by the studios, by the industry for a number of years now.
To the point where I would say there are very few productions that I have worked on where I feel like I can look around and think, wow, like there's a lot of women in charge on this show. And that feels weird when it happens because it doesn't happen.
It's very extremely frustrating when you're trying to discuss why you're worth the extra $2.04, extra 50 cents, extra whatever. And the person replies back to you, well, back in my day, we did have a lot tougher than you. It's almost as if they're tone deaf. Mm-hmm. And with all due respect, back in your day, unless you're over 100 years old, I'm pretty sure you did not have to face a pandemic that completely highlighted how low our rates are. We knew our rates were bad before the pandemic. When it was time for the pandemic, not only were they unlivable, now they're just cruel. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, how has the pandemic affected your position, your livelihood?
Zoom, I mean, so I worked mostly this year as a writer's assistant, and I also am now working as a script coordinator. And I have to say, Zoom, I'm like very grateful that Zoom exists and that we were able to transition. The transition has been extremely rough. It's not just, it's like 10 times more exhausting to be on Zoom all day. I worked a show at the beginning of the pandemic and we were on Zoom for standard hours, which meant that we were on Zoom breaking story for 8 to 10 hours a day. And it's just extremely exhausting and draining. And then you're dealing with, I think writer's assistant and script coordinators, it's been, unfortunately, like a lot of the reasons that we take these jobs is the networking and the being able to FaceTime with people and, like talk about other things other than work in the in-between time, and creating those personal connections is completely gone. It happens a little bit over Zoom, but like you don't really get to know anyone, which makes it harder for people to consider you as, to move up. And anyways, I could go on and on, but like the ergonomic stuff, I had to order a new chair, a new laptop, monitor, and like keyboard and everything. My utilities have gone way up, like all this stuff. And, of the 2 shows that I worked as a writer's assistant, one show didn't pay me a single dollar of work from home stipend or anything like that. They certainly didn't pay for my chair or anything that I needed to use to work, even though, like, if we were in any other industry, they would look at it and say, oh, this could be a serious workers' comp issue. We're having a person whose job it is to type all day. And if we don't give them ergonomic support, they could have, you know, workplace injuries and sue us. And like in our industry, it's like no one cares. Like they just do not care.
It's interesting that you say that because like I was talking to one of my really good friends who's also a writer's assistant, and he was actually at the doctor's because he had to start injecting. I forgot what it was, but he started having to have shots because unfortunately it's gotten so painful for him to write all day. So with that being the case, first of all, he's young. The fact that he has to do that, can you please explain to me why the role of the writer's assistant is not a skilled position?
Yeah, when it's having like a physical toll
Yeah.
on your body.
Oh yeah.
I think for me, I'm very grateful that I have figured out how to do my job from home. That is not possible for and everyone on crew, let alone everyone in my craft. I have figured out with the shows that I have been on how to do that. But COVID and the COVID protocols have ripple effects that are not short and are not minimal. And I'm sure Katie has a lot to say about this for production. But, you know, for me in art, I am in charge of communicating the testing for everyone in our department, the onboarding for them, the effects of a positive test, knocking somebody out of your crew and figuring out scheduling of bringing somebody else in with prep while you're prepping one location, shooting one location, wrapping another. Like the industry is all of these moving pieces, and this COVID piece just adds like this huge complicated layer to every little piece that you're doing. And there's no additional compensation for all of that additional work. On top of that, while I think it is wonderful that the industry has finally gone digital, because in March of 2020, I was filling out literal carbon copy purchase orders for shows. The digital systems are new and not great in all cases, and they take so much longer. It's so frustrating. And so while I'm grateful for Zoom, it is complicated and things take longer, and there's no additional compensation for that work, which is, you know, frustrating and disappointing, although not surprising at all.
Yeah, COVID is a special nightmare. I mean, it's affected everyone, everywhere, obviously. At least in my realm of production coordinating during the time of the pandemic when things were kind of up in the air, to kind of replug the livable wage thing again, like I was on a timeline that there was like this amount of time left for me to stay in LA, to be here, like at a certain clock point in time, there was going to be Katie has to pack up and with the little money she has left, go home and go live with mom and dad again at 33 years old. So like, just to throw that out there. And I also wanted to plug student debt. I sure wish in the time that I've been graduated that I could afford to pay that off, and I cannot. I still remain on an income-driven plan since I graduated because that's all I can afford to pay. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I know that affects a lot of people as well. As far as how has the pandemic affected specifically production coordinating, I have never felt more capable of justifying why my job deserves more pay than now. I work 3 jobs in one constantly since COVID happened. We now have COVID teams and COVID vernacular in our daily life, which is great that it has grown to this. And I personally think that having a health and safety team is one of the greatest things to come to our industry. I wish it applied to more things such as, you know, personal health and taking the proper amount of time off when you're ill. I wish it applied to exercise and being able to go and go to a therapist appointment, but not on a Saturday because that's the only time that I can make it work. And most therapist offices aren't even open. I can't afford to exercise, all of those things, you know, like it's just one thing after another. Anyways, I think the health and safety team has a huge place to grow in our industry personally. Beyond that, how did we get to the point of having a health and safety team in the first place? Production coordinators. That's how. Most of the COVID teams are built from coordinators. Most of the jobs that are available are people that are asking that you're either previously an AD or you're previously a coordinator. And in a lot of ways, that doesn't necessarily transition the entire responsibility of that into the COVID team either, because then you've got as many people who don't know how to do the job or aren't as familiar with the entertainment industry coming in to do that job because they're medical experts. Who's going to bridge that gap and that understanding of like, well, the grips need to be able to be here at this time for this amount of hours because of prep and et cetera. Like we still need people to be there doing tests and making sure people have masks on and making sure people are 6 feet apart. You know, there's closing that gap. And then there's that transition of getting those things up and running in the first place for every single show that you work on as well. Who's going to do the testing, who's going to do the cleaning and the fogging of the stages at night. I mean, it is an entire different element of my job that I would say makes up at least 25% of what I do at any given time now. That's a huge takeaway from what was already a job that takes 100% of my time and brain power 5 days a week for 13 to 16 hours a day. So yes, COVID and the pandemic has changed everything about my life and about my job. It's made it so much more difficult. It's made it so much more responsibility. And I'm still getting paid not enough money if I was going to be unemployed for a month. Like, I'm screwed.
I think one of the things that really shocked some members outside these crafts is that unemployment with the additional pandemic unemployment assistance last year was a higher weekly income than many of our members are taking in take-home pay in these full-time, more than full-time, if you're considering 40 hours a week full-time jobs in TV and film. These are not low budget projects. There is already an equitable wage structure for low tier, low budget projects. These are network shows and big movies, things on Netflix, right? These studios absolutely can and do pay to everyone else equitable wages. And the fact that, you know, the industry was very generous during shutdown. Those first couple weeks, some shows paid between 2 and 8 weeks of relief pay to members. But when it's paid on 8 hours of the contracted wage instead of your negotiated wage, in a number of cases, our members would have made more on unemployment. So that relief pay cost them.
That definitely speaks volumes, because I was one of the fortunate ones who stayed employed during the entire time of the pandemic. But there was a period where we quickly realized, me and the other support staff, that our friends who were laid off got a higher unemployment check than what we were making. And me and the writer assistant, we were just in shock, because not only were the unemployed people making more money than what we were making, but the studio actually took away one of the things that helped compensated our low rate, and that was having a free lunch. No one at least during the time early in the pandemic, no one was getting a free lunch from the studios. And what was really sad was, even before the pandemic, me and the other support staff had a deal where every Friday we would go into the kitchen, take all the foods that were about to expire, and that was our groceries for the month. It's just really disheartening, because why is it that we have to rely on these free lunches to be able to have our meals for the entire day, and sometimes even up until the next morning?
I have very much been there. I am of the same, like I did the exact same thing. Like I would always take home the groceries and craft services every week and stuff. And I did a lot of the, like, when you order lunch, you order a big lunch and then you split it into lunch and dinner. And that's just been how I've always handled eating. on these jobs because we don't have money for groceries. And they have taken that away, and like they don't even seem, it's like such a drop in the bucket to them. I think it's just like that's what's so insulting. And like I also was one of the people that when I was working, I made more on, I think it was actually exactly the same on unemployment as at my writer's assistant job over the summer of last year. And it's like, I literally, they gave me the same rate as the PA, and my checks literally said PA. And I have over 10 years of experience. I don't want to age myself too much, but I have over 10 years of experience in the industry. And I also graduated from film school and have a production degree. So like, it just is like, these jobs aren't entry level. And like, I think it's just so insulting. It's like, I was willing to take the job for the experience and in hopes of being able to grow as a writer. And that there's a whole other part of that job that I can't get into, but I think it's like a lot of this, it's just like, so it becomes really insulting. It's like, I get that we're stepping stone jobs in some ways, but the industry has changed. And I guess the one thing that I did want to hit on, I guess, is like when we talk about how it was in someone else's day and how it is now, the times have completely changed. We went through a recession not really that long ago, and now we're going through COVID, and like cost of living in Los Angeles has skyrocketed. There's nothing comparable. And like, I know for a fact that during the writer's strike, I think, which was 2008, during the writer's strike, a lot of these jobs pre-writer's strike were paid a lot more. And they used the writer's strike and the recession as a way to cut back. And then they kept those wages low for years and years and years. And so it's like, it's quite literally different than what they experienced as being a low wage worker. And in most cases, when you talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, I had a studio apartment. I can't afford a studio apartment. I've never been able to afford a studio apartment. I've only lived with roommates the entire time that I've lived in Los Angeles. So it's like, it's just fundamentally not the same.
I think people, when they hear me talking about this a lot, are like, so why don't you leave? Right? Like, so say I give up on the industry. If people who work with me on the same shows every day don't understand what I do, translating what I do and my skill set outside of this industry is even harder. The one time I was like, I can't do this anymore, and was applying to jobs I 100% was qualified for, people, just because I work in TV and film and they could not see the direct job title, were like, you're not qualified and we're not considering you for this job. So many of us have gotten so many years into these crafts that, it's not fair to just ask us to give up and abandon everything that we've put in. On top of that, even if I do abandon it, I don't want the other people in these positions to be stuck in this position either. No one should be working under these conditions. And so the reason that we all speak out constantly is because the systems need to change, whether I personally am in it or not.
The other thing we also need to talk about, besides having a living wage, is the simple fact that our jobs are so demanding when it comes to our time. We've heard of the horror stories of fratter days. And in your opinion, why, I know, right? In your opinion, why is providing a reasonable rest so much to ask for some productions?
I'm sure Emma has a lot to say about this.
Well, so this show that I'm on now, a logical fratter day is very different than an illogical fratter day. In fact, on this show, we had 3 weeks in a row of I got home at 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday. But like one of the times we were shooting in an interior of an apartment.
Oh no.
Couldn't see out one window. In fact, the EPs after that night said, I want a list of for some reason they hadn't cleared I'm not going to get into the details, but they hadn't cleared the location and no one knew that this was the location, and it was just nonsensical, right? We didn't need the Friday, and we had so many of them that we didn't need that the EPs and writers said, guess what? All of these scenes that are night in the script, we're actually going to change them today, just so we wouldn't be put in that position again, which is fantastic because they saw what it was doing to the crew and they on purpose didn't do it. And that just never happens, right? But because they were having to live it as well and sacrifice their time and Fridays or their one weekend day, they did something about it. And I think that is really one of the disconnects, is that a lot of these people who are making these rules are not living through it. So they don't actually understand how it is affecting people's lives. All of our jobs, all of our crafts are very brain intensive. If we are not sharp, things fall through the cracks. And when things fall through the cracks in any of our crafts, it's a really big problem. You can't be, shooting in an art gallery, but, the art department, again, I don't actually know all of the intricacies of what an art department coordinator does, but the art department coordinator was tired because she didn't have enough at rest time. And I'm not saying she would make a mistake because she would drink more coffee or something, but then the delivery of the paintings don't come till Thursday, but they switch the schedule. I mean, there's so many elements that no one sees and no one understands how quickly like one pin could be pulled because of not having enough rest, or not even, guess what, you got out at midnight on a Saturday, but you had to take your kid to the soccer game at 7 a.m. Then you had to go do your laundry and go to the grocery store and get your, all of the things we have to do. They don't see it. They have assistants and other people that do it. So when it doesn't affect them, I don't even know where I started this thing. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to regroup. But when it doesn't affect them, it's very easy for them not to want to make a change to make it better for others. They don't see it. They may hear about it, may not. We're on rollback rates right now with a company that is sending rockets into the sky. So they're not at they don't have a need for money, yet every single department on this particular show is on rollback rates. Why? You want people to just keep earning less after a pandemic when there were so many problems and everything? Like, y'all are making them, you actually are the people making the money, right? All of the streamings and everything went up times a million because that's all anyone could do. Yet all of our rates are down. Why?
Yeah, everyone turned to the arts in the pandemic, right? It was something to occupy you and spend time with each other. People are even doing it remotely, like remote watch parties to connect with other people. And while there is an enormous amount of work, and so we have seen it in that way, we have not seen it in any additional compensation. I think that reasonable rest in terms of turnaround and also actually having a meal where you actually take a break and don't work and get to consume food, but also rest, is important for not making mistakes, but it's also important for our health, physical and mental, right? We hear stories of members who are afraid to go to the bathroom because their bosses monitor their bathroom use and they're afraid to leave their desks for fear that they miss the thing that's said in the room during that 1.5 minute period. Script supervisors, there's no one to replace them. They can't just like pop out to go to the bathroom. So if you're taking away meals, you're taking away the one chance that certain people have to take a break, not only to take care of themselves in terms of consuming food, which we need to, function, but also to rest, get off our feet, turn your brain off for a minute. And I think that there's no other industry that assumes 12+ hour days as the norm. There is no reason that we need to be shooting that way. There might be some cases in which that is necessary, and we are a workforce who is capable of doing that when needed, but it should not be the norm, and we should not be doing it 5+ days a week for weeks on end. It is absolutely unhealthy, and it's more than time that the industry realized that and prioritized the worker health that fuels their entire profit.
When I was
I think COVID didn't make that better either. I think there was this whole thing at the beginning of the pandemic with the white papers that came out, and how, okay, we're gonna pull our hours back because that's what's healthy. And it's so weird to hear our industry say that that is the healthier thing, and then to go back on that entirely and to pay no mind or heed to it whatsoever. And honestly, to not work any crews less than 10 hours beyond. Like, I was on very few days where it was 10 hours or less. They did happen, but they were not, it was not a change. And it's really disheartening to say that in a time of a pandemic, working less hours is something we really should consider. And then we didn't, and then we still don't think about it. And I also kind of wanted to plug in there, you know, meal penalties even don't feel like a penalty anymore. I mean, I do the PRs every single day, which is the report that breaks down how many meal penalties people had so that we can do a cost report on it. I mean, people get 7, 8, 9, 10 meal penalties at times. Our hair and makeup departments, it's absurd how many meal penalties they get. And that's in one day, you know, and it doesn't really feel like a penalty when you're saying, yeah, we're willing to pay out 7, 8, 9, 10 penalties, which is a half hour for every continued hour or amount of time worked after you're owed a break. Like, it's crazy to me that it's okay to pay the penalties at some point too.
Right. If it's just a operations cost that they just factor in, it is not dissuading them from doing that, which is what a penalty is intended and should be doing.
Exactly.
You know what I
And
noticed on your thing about the 10-hour days, what I noticed is that, and maybe many of us do, when we were actually doing the 10-hour days, my paychecks were so little because I make all my money in meal penalties and overtime and the 12th and the 13th and 14th hour, that when it was 10-hour days, I'm like, oh God. Or 9-hour days when they were even abiding by that. I didn't like it because it made my paycheck so much lower. So I'm like, wow, I'd rather work my butt off and not sleep. I mean, I'm exhausted now because I got home at 4:30 a.m. yesterday from Riverside. You know,
and that's exploitation right there. That's exploitive of all of the crew members that are working on these shows.
What's interesting is like this was back when I was working in production. I was on this one project where I got paid a pretty good rate, but the hours were so ridiculous that every single weekend I went to the local IV therapy and literally injected myself with IV vitamins and minerals just so I wouldn't get sick. I had to do that every single weekend in order to do that project because the hours were so awful. And I'm talking about 22 hours a day. My paychecks were great, but there was a point where I was about to be hospitalized. So it's either I go to the hospital or I inject myself with IV therapy.
I think too, it leaves little time for rest in the sense of like when you do get those days off, you know, your body has to have an even longer time to build back up. You know, like working all of these hours throughout Monday through Friday, and then Saturday, sure, I have Saturday and Sunday off, but truly the exhaustion that is caused by all of this requires 2 days just to like prop myself back up, you know, let alone feeling refreshed. It's just enough to like turn your computer back on again, not for it to run quickly or well. Like, that's what's also hard about the whole thing, is that it's not even just about no Fraturdays. It's about like all of it is so exhaustive that the time off that we do have is not time off, not to mention the fact that you're still taking calls and emails anyways.
No, I got 2 scripts. I have 3 brand new scripts of episodes today. I got home at 4:30 yesterday. Didn't have to. I volunteered for a beach cleanup a month ago at 9 a.m. on yesterday because I didn't know I would be out at 4:30 in the morning. I mean, again, fine. I could have canceled, but I want to also be helping my community and me. That makes me feel good. So, then I raced to that, and then I had plans to go to the Hollywood Bowl last night. Again, very lucky. I know my cat just got up in there. So thank you for bringing another animal. So I didn't feel like a crazy single cat lady, which I am, by the way. But, in order to have some sort of a life with a volunteer work and an event one night, and mind you, I don't normally do anything but It made me feel human. But today, went to the farmer's market, and then even this at 4 o'clock. I am so exhausted. I'm going to turn this off, read 2 scripts, maybe, and then go to sleep by 7 o'clock because I can't. I'm done. I have no reserves. I have no energy. I am so tired, but I'm fighting to just have a life, right? You're just fighting to just get groceries, go volunteer, go anything. Did I do my laundry? Absolutely not. I didn't even, I did take out the trash this morning. I did one thing. Did it.
We're definitely all fighting for, honestly, just decency at this point. And with that being said, I leave it open to you guys for the closing remarks. What is one thing that you definitely think that the studios and anyone else should know about this?
It's as simple as being more than performative, as Marissa put it. Saying what you mean, or doing what you say you want, and doing what you mean and what you intend, and following through with it, and really taking care of the people that help you profit every single day. Because I think that there's a payoff in that, even for them. Rested crews is better work, period. Well-paid crews, better work. Like, it's as simple as that. Pay us what we need to survive appropriately in this day and age, in the cities that we're living in, and for the work that you're asking us to do. And be honest and really tackle the problems that you say you want to tackle. Be responsible for them, and don't just speak to them, do it, do the work. And that's in paying people equitably and giving us appropriate rest.
Yeah, I think for me, it's that this industry needs to put its money where its mouth is. I think Hollywood gets credit for being this progressive place that is fighting for inclusion and representation and diversity. Many of those things might be happening at the actor level, if they're even happening there, which is debatable. But we need to have them happening at all levels of crew, and particularly for those of us who are being paid the least, who are the most impacted and affected. And it's really that simple. The industry needs to put its money where its mouth is, and they absolutely have the money to do it.
You know that the studios are all kind of soulless, but it's like there was a period of time, I think, before we had so much emphasis on these huge corporations and on bottom lines and on shareholders. And in that time, it was very much like you could be middle class and work in the industry, and it wasn't, there weren't these huge gaps between classes. And like, I think they need to look at the broader picture of, what is this doing? Who are these people? Like, who are the people in these positions? Why are the people that are in these positions? And, have some empathy. I mean, just for us to have to make a whole discussion about how we have, Colby and I have to take home groceries, like, as women, I'm assuming in our 30s, like, I don't know, I have no idea how old you are, but like I'm in my 30s and I still like rely on leftover groceries. Like, I am not in college. It was one thing when I was in college and I would take home the crafty from set, but like now I'm in my 30s, I should be able to afford groceries. Like, I think we need to constantly be looking at what the impact is on the industry and like how, just unfair it is, like blatantly, like,
and how about a house too? Can I afford a
Yeah.
house? Am I allowed to afford that? It seems like
Yeah.
a key thing.
Yeah. Or just like, if you want to take every hour of my life, maybe you can compensate it for me. And like the one last thing that I did want to touch on is, I have friends that basically have resigned from the support staff community, because the stress of being needed, especially with script coordinating specifically, it's like always being, you're 100% on call all the time. And like the studios don't want to pay for that. And there's a very serious mental toll to, I could be needed at any moment. I can't really make plans for my life because I don't know when that phone call is going to come. I personally carry my laptop with me everywhere I go. I am always on my phone. I actually like freak out if I don't have service. I don't go on long hikes. Like, you know, there's a very real impact on all of our lives in small ways and in big ways. And I would really like if the studio just had a heart and just it doesn't even matter to their bottom line. Like us getting a little bit more money doesn't make them less profitable. It's just, you know, it's just a humanitarian thing. And it makes me very sad for our country on like a larger scale, because I think this is something that's happening not just in our industry, but across the country in terms of skilled labor. Anyways, that's my soapbox.
I was gonna say almost the exact same thing, because it's like, it's not gonna hurt them to help so many people, and it's gonna take very little effort to actually make a difference, right?
Yeah.
It's not gonna affect their pockets. It's not gonna affect their salaries. It's just going to like no one is asking for special treatment. We're just asking for equality. You know, we're just asking to like have a life like a normal person, right? That's not special, right? We bust our butts because we love what we do and we just want to be compensated for it. And it doesn't affect them. You're absolutely right. It doesn't affect their bottom line. They can still have all their houses. We just
Yeah.
want to have a tiny studio.
Yeah.
We're literally not asking for a rate that will give us a second beach house in Malibu. We're just asking to be able to pay our rent, our electricity, and hey, maybe eat more than one meal a day. And honestly, like I really do appreciate everyone's bravery and compassion and strength when it comes to fighting this really exhausting, very, very, very long fight. But I'm excited for what's to come. And I look forward to the day when, instead of sharing these stories of heartbreak and frustration and pain, we're actually celebrating our achievements with a living wage and reasonable rest.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.